Okay, so today we're doing a deep dive into affirmative action. We're looking at where it started, how it changed, and maybe surprisingly, who really benefited most over the decades based on the sources you sent over.
That's right. The mission here is to unpack that shift, How did we get from AA being a specific remedy, mainly for Black Americans descended from slavery, to this much broader idea of diversity? And, who actually gained the most ground?
Let's start at the beginning then. President Lyndon Johnson, 1965. Executive Order 11246. His aim seemed pretty clear, restorative.
Absolutely. He gave that famous speech at Howard University talking about how you can't just take someone who's been, quote, hobbled by chains, bring them to the starting line, and expect a fair race.
Right. So the logic initially was very direct, addressing the ongoing effects of slavery and segregation, specifically for Black Americans.
But what's fascinating, and you see this in the timeline, is how quickly that focus, it broadened out.
Yeah, almost immediately, right? The first order covered race, color, national origin.
But then just 2 years later, 1967, Johnson issues Executive Order 11375. And this adds sex to the list, apparently after quite a bit of pressure from women's groups.
Even though the original justification was about race and slavery's legacy.
Exactly. And from that point, the criteria just sort of kept expanding. It grew to cover pretty much any group seen as underrepresented. Ethnicity, immigrant status, you name it.
Policy reviews basically said AA started shifting opportunities away from white men, generally towards minorities and females.
Yeah, and this wider approach tracks with a really critical legal change, too. Back in the 60s, the courts saw it as fixing past harms, particularly for Black Americans.
But then came the Bake case in 78, Regents v. Bake.
Right, and the Supreme Court essentially said, okay, the new rationale, the acceptable one, is diversity. Race could be a plus factor, but the goal wasn't really redress anymore. It was about achieving diversity in, say, a student body.
So diversity became the legal justification. And the data kind of shows who walked through that door, doesn't it?
It really does. When you look at the numbers, overall, the group that saw the largest statistical gains were actually white women.
That California study from 1995 you flagged, that was pretty stark.
Oh, definitely. It showed white women holding, over 57,000 managerial jobs in that sample, compared to about 10,500 for African Americans, 19,000 for Latinos, 24,000 for Asian Americans.
And you also noted that by 2009, women were earning the majority of bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees. So that's one major, maybe unexpected outcome. But then there's another layer when you look within the Black community itself.
Okay.
Well, the benefits didn't just flow broadly. They also increasingly went to Black immigrants and multiracial individuals, especially in selective institutions. And Asian Americans also emerged as, quote, among the greatest direct beneficiaries.
So within the Black student population at top colleges, you find what some sources call a growing majority who are actually children of immigrants or multiracial, often outnumbering students whose families endured generations of U.S. slavery. Nicole Hannah-Jones has written about this quite pointedly.
Which gets us right to the heart of the criticism we saw in the sources.
Exactly. The argument is that by lumping everyone African-descended together, the policy kind of diluted its original purpose. It ended up benefiting immigrant groups or maybe more privileged Black individuals and other minority groups, arguably more than the descendants of American slaves it was first meant for.
So what's the proposed fix, according to these critics?
Well, the main idea is something called disaggregation, basically separating out the groups. They argue for targeting AA-style benefits only to those who can actually trace their ancestry back to U.S. slavery, sometimes called foundational Black Americans.
Maybe using something like the 1870 census to establish lineage.
Yeah, something like that. The goal would be to, restore that original reparative intent that LBJ seemed to articulate back in 65.
It creates this real irony, doesn't it? Affirmative action clearly helped integrate schools and workplaces, which is huge.
No question. Major impact there.
But the specific group it was arguably designed to lift up the most descendants of U.S. slavery often got overshadowed. One source even used the term ethnically cleansed from some selective programs because of the rising numbers of immigrant and multiracial Black students.
It really highlights the difference between integration as a goal versus specific targeted redress.
AA did integrate, but maybe didn't prioritize that original group.
So the final thought we want to leave you, the listener, with is this. If the evidence suggests affirmative action, as it evolved, didn't consistently prioritize foundational Black Americans, Well, what is the best way forward today if the specific goal is restorative justice for that unique historical injury of U.S. slavery? Something to think about.